Hi, I'm Doug Donnelly, and welcome to Cecil TV. This is another interview in a series of interviews of candidates before the primary in June. Tonight, we welcome Derek Howell, who is a Republican. He's running for state delegate for District 35B, which encompasses Rising Sun, Northeast, Perryville, Port Deposit, etc., the western end of the county. He's going up against incumbent Kevin Hornberger and another newcomer, Erica Burge. So, Derek, welcome.
Doug, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Right. So, you recently answered the 15-question questionnaire for Sports Weekly, and you gave some really pretty fleshed out answers, which was great. But we're going to dig into some of them, and we'll probably just going to repeat some for the people who haven't read that. I guess the first question is, who is Derek Howell?
Thank you. It's a great question. Well, let me answer that by saying the most important things that mean the most to me. First, I'm a Christian, and then I'd say the Lord's blessed me with a wonderful wife, Jenna. I've been married for almost 19 years, and we have 4 wonderful children: Hudson, James, Josiah, and Ridgely.
Hudson's a great name.
Thank you. A very strong name. And they're wonderful, all of them, so I'm very blessed to have them. I am a retired police officer. I spent over 2 decades in law enforcement, including actually here in Cecil County in the late 90s when I was a Maryland State Trooper.
Oh.
I am also an attorney, and I've been practicing for a little over 17 years. I used to teach at college. I've taught at a couple colleges. I used to teach constitutional law and some other law and criminal justice courses. So I really have kind of a passion for the law. Is something that really just, it's kind of innate in me.
Did you go to school at night, or how did that work?
So I started law school. Was going to actually do it in the evening program, but then I ended up changing some things around and actually did it full-time day, and was able to get it over and done with. So
that's excellent.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. So why are you running? Why now?
Right.
Politics.
Right. Of all times, right? It's the candid answer is that Maryland is a wonderful state. I mean, we've got the mountains out in western Maryland. Of course, we've got the ocean on the eastern shore. We're so close to D.C., so close to Philadelphia. So many historical things between the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, things like that in our area. We just have so much wonderful things. But Maryland, depending on who you look at and how you research it, unfortunately, sometimes it's not as business friendly with some things. And there are a lot of things that I just kind of disagree with that's been coming out of Annapolis. And my wife and I, we talked about, do we uproot and move? And our family's here, and I think, well, you know what? Maybe instead of moving, we stay here. And when I say fight, I mean, politically.
Right. See what you can change.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And because we don't just believe in just uproot and leave and taking our ball and going home. Make this a better place, and especially when I think about, my wife and I have talked about this, about our children. What are we leaving them? What state are we leaving them? And want to make it a better place.
So, drilling down on some of your responses to in the Sports Weekly, one, you talk about spending and how Maryland must cut its spending addiction.
Right.
So, where would you begin? What would you cut?
Well, goodness. I mean, that could be a really long list. Let me just think about some of the things that were coming out of this. In fact, I think today's sine die, we're the end of the session. Some of the things coming out of the legislature that maybe have good intentions, but really is it a proper role for civil government? And one example is the bill, and I can't remember the bill number, but it was to provide financial training for people. looking at financial skills, how to do banking and things like that. Those are, it's a very good thing, but is that really the role civil government should be doing? Should we really be investing taxpayers' money in to do that? When we could be looking at other things, maybe possibly charities, volunteer organizations, and that's something that I think, unfortunately, in our today's society, we look, if there's a problem, let's get civil government to solve it. Even things from healthcare. You look around in this area, we were just speaking about the area here, and 100 some years ago, you look at the name of the hospitals, St. Agnes, St. Joe's, things like that, where years ago that charities ran a lot of things. So looking at where we can cut things and ask the question, is this a proper role for civil government? Is it something that civil government needs to be involved in? Or can we try to network?
Right. There aren't too many public hospitals, though.
No, they're private organizations, and you look at nowadays especially, and unfortunately and this gets into a bigger question about healthcare and things like that, even kind of beyond the state level of issues. But I guess what I meant by that is that have we come where we're really relying on civil government to answer the needs? And I mean it sincerely, that if somebody's not financially literate, we don't want people to be in that position. But again, is that really what we need to be doing, spending more money to equip people when we can do it in a different way?
Yeah. Well, I suppose there's a number. I don't know who would do it. We've attempted to educate the public on financial matters with a series of programs on here, but you could give a grant to the libraries or something, and they could do something like that. But again, that's public money. Okay. So you also talk about, in your responses, control of local school systems.
Yes.
So if somehow there was more local control, from a local perspective, how would this change our schools? What is the change that you seek? First, are your kids in public school?
We actually homeschool our children.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what sort of changes would you want? Do you think local control might bring about?
Sure. Great question. And as part of my answer, I have family members who served in the public school system, teachers. So I have a great respect for teachers. The job that they're asked to do and to educate the children, and sometimes without a lot of resources. I remember family members who have had to spend their own money on things because they wanted to ensure that the kids were receiving certain things, and it would come out of their own pockets.
Sure.
What I meant by that answer is that each area is different. Cecil County is different than a big county like Montgomery County. Baltimore City is different than a county like Worcester County down on the Eastern Shore. And the people who live in those counties know those counties the best. I really like the idea of, and I believe in, the importance of local government. And that would be included with the school boards, and giving the ability to the school boards to be elected at the local level and have their control, because they're closest to the people really that they would represent, and the families and the children that are involved in that community. So allowing and giving more, I guess, authority to the local school boards to see, hey, this works, this doesn't work. Some areas are, I'm glad to see that some schools are now really looking at getting back into trades. Not everybody wants to go into college. Not everybody, and so it's important that, we don't just have a model that's just, graduate high school and go to college. And there's nothing wrong with going to college.
Right.
But it's also nothing wrong with learning a skill.
Right. But looking at Cecil County, we have a technical high school that's, they're actually, believe it or not, running out of space in that huge facility. And, that's under the status quo. Yeah.
And that's wonderful in the work that they're doing and being able to educate children, and the important things.
And it's working too. Yeah, and those people are getting jobs.
And that's what's critical, because when they come out with skills and they can get jobs, not only good for them and their immediate family, but it's also good for the county because we're being more productive, jobs, employers here in the county, and does that encourage more businesses to come in? So providing those real life skills, really important, and that's something that where I think that having something coming from each county, where the county and the people who are elected by the voters there know better than coming out of Annapolis. And sure, we have delegates and senators obviously elected locally too, but again, having more control at the local level is what I like.
Okay. All right. Energy.
Yes.
A big one in Maryland. But as reading through your responses, I saw an interesting kind of, interesting relationship between two of your things. You have a problem, and I'm assuming since the legislature session is over, that it didn't pass, HB 778, which would have more or less forced the counties, et cetera, to bend their zoning rules to allow the construction of, I guess, housing, middle. They don't say middle class housing.
Right.
I'm not exactly sure what kind of housing, but in any case, you seem firmly opposed to that sort of bending of local zone. But my point is, the point to get to here, is you say the problem with energy is that we need more power plants. Well, the reason, particularly nuclear plants, not that I don't imagine we're going to build more than one more nuclear plant in Maryland, but other kinds of plants, pipelines, all of it, particularly out in Carroll County, as we were talking about Carroll County, there's a huge thing about building power lines.
Right.
People don't want to see this stuff. They don't want it near them, period. And so, the recourse, and so this is one of the large obstacles to expanding power production in the state of Maryland. So
Sure.
Where does, if you can't have middle class housing and you can't have powerful, where does this, you're the constitutional lawyer.
Sure.
Explain this to us.
Well, I absolutely do believe in property rights, of course. But let me answer with the housing issue that was brought up first. Is that, again, I'm not in favor of Annapolis coming to the counties and dictating and saying to these counties that you need to have a certain amount of housing here and there develop. And it has really nothing to do with middle class as it is deciding that, if you're going to build these type of houses here, you've got to have these types of houses here. That should really be left up to the local zoning, in my opinion. That type of thing, again, coming back to local government can govern better than what's coming out of Annapolis with that. You make a great point, though, that a lot of people, it's not in my backyard, do I want to see smokestacks and things. I'm thinking of in eastern Baltimore County a couple years ago, they ended up demolishing right in the Bullies Quarters area. There was a long-time power plant there that they ended up completely demolishing, blew it up. That land right there, so why demolish that? Why take it out of service? Why not take that land and rebuild a type of power plant? It's been there for years. So use those strategic locations. And there are things, and I'm not an expert on when I'm about to talk about nuclear by far, but there's nuclear technology that's coming out. In fact, out of Montgomery County, there's a couple businesses down there to explore those options to see, okay, well, we had this power plant there in eastern Baltimore County. Can we be more effective, whether it be nuclear or maybe some type of clean coal, as opposed to just demolishing and leaving it and then trying to move on?
It would most likely be gas these days.
Something like that, and we're also seeing, because we're seeing a more energy use. More and more people are looking into and purchasing electric vehicles. So of course, there's more electricity that's being pulled on. There was also something that I touched on, was that in 2024, the legislature got rid of deregulation. And so that essentially, folks, before there was competition in the market and people could choose, am I going to use company A or company B? How much am I going to have to spend on kilowatts? Company A is going to give me a better deal. I'm going to give my business to that company, and the legislature got rid of that. So I'm for getting back to deregulation, allowing the consumers, allowing the companies to compete, so that in the end there's a choice, and helping. So between that and again looking at our existing infrastructure with power plants, how can we improve that? Things that we've, the Eastern Baltimore County example of that being demolished, and can we rebuild something there? So that we get more power back into the infrastructure.
Okay. You talk about, I guess I really have to thank Sports Weekly for feeding us the ideas here. But you point out, or you say, that we need to get people involved in the democratic process. Now, as someone who has been running an organization, Cecil TV, Cecil Public Media, as an effort to promote civic awareness, civic involvement, and finding it an enormously frustrating pursuit.
Sure.
What are your thoughts for how to get people involved in the democratic process? We know we're going to come to the primaries, and the turnout's going to look nothing like a general election. And why? And when people should know that the primaries around here that's it. That is the election.
Right. That's a great point. Well, first, let me commend you. I mean, I do appreciate. Cecil TV is an example of, again, on a local level, doing something to get out to educate voters, educate the local community. So you do a great job. And yeah, it's funny, I was just gave a presentation over the weekend, and we talked about the importance of getting involved. And Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution guarantees a Republican form of government. Now, I'm not talking about Republican Party. We're talking about that representative government, right? And that's great, but if we don't have people who are going to get engaged and get involved, and this is my personal view, that we're very comfortable. We can become very complacent as a society when we're very entertained.
Right. We're victims of our own success.
Truly. And there's nothing wrong with watching a sports game or something like that. But if we spend more time watching TV, or just sitting perusing on our phones or whatever it is, instead of knowing our neighbors, right, having community and that fact, knowing who our elected representatives are, knowing what type of process our political system put in place. When I used to teach college, we touched on the 17th Amendment. And the 17th Amendment is a way that changed the way how the United States senators are put into office. Prior to the 17th Amendment, the state legislatures would choose who the 2 U.S. senators were going to be, and then they sent them to D.C., and that was a check on the federal government. That's why, for example, they're between treaties and, for example, Supreme Court justices and federal judges, when the president goes to appoint them, there's that hearings in the Senate, right? They need the president needs the advice and consent of the Senate rather than the approval. When you have the 17th Amendment, that changed it. Now senators are chosen by popular vote. And so one of the questions I used to ask my students, is it better to have your U.S. senators elected, popular, or to have them appointed? And overwhelmingly they would say, well, elected. And then my next question was, well, who are your 2 U.S. senators? And then they kind of would stall on that. And the idea that civics really needs to be something taught at the home, but it's also in the schools, engaging. And it's a nonpartisan issue. It's not about Republicans and Democrats. It's about the system in place. That understanding that we need to be good stewards of the system we have in place, and we need to know, how is my representative voting? What does he or she believe in? If I elect this person, how are we going to get them there? I also think it's something, having clubs in the schools that can encourage students to get more engaged into civics and things like that. But
Sure.
it's really important, and I think, as you said, we're kind of our own demise of our successes here, and if we continue with the idea of let's just be entertained, we lose an understanding of what is my responsibility as a citizen.
I wasn't going to ask about this, but as you were speaking, I thought of it. As someone who has taught political science, what's your thought on the question of in-district versus at-large voting in Cecil County?
Okay, I see what yes. Well,
Is one more democratic than the
Right.
other?
It depends on almost who you're going to ask. I'll give you my opinion in a moment here, because there are some people who think that, well, if it's in district, there are some pros there because, well, that person's going to come out of my district. If you ask another person, no, at large, because since it's the county itself, it's important that people as a whole put those people in. And yes, they can pay closer attention to their district there, but does the county as a choice? So it really depends on who you're going to ask that question,
Right.
and what's the basis behind that. I like the way that it's currently done as county at large, because it gives opportunity for, we want to run the best people, and and again let the voters choose who those people are. So.
Okay. All right. Then my final question is, what is a constitutional conservative?
Great question. So a constitutional conservative. So first, understanding and knowing the Constitution, and I would say that it really goes back to the original intent of the Constitution. What did the founders, what did they mean when they put the Constitution together? One little bit of history here is that when the Constitution that we have today was, when they were going there and debating on that, that wasn't their actual intention. That convention was really to amend the Articles of Confederation, but they weren't working properly. And we ended up getting a whole new constitution out of the matter. And so it's important to see when they debated on those things, and we can read the records because they kept records of those. What did they mean when they put certain things into writing on that? So being a constitutional conservative, someone wants to go back and look and see. Now, thankfully, they put in place a way to amend the Constitution, okay? And that's the proper way of doing it. A constitutional conservative would believe that, look, if something's broken with the Constitution, if we need to change it, let's go through the amendment process, as opposed to people who would believe that, well, we have a living, breathing Constitution, and that can be changed or altered by, for example, a Supreme Court precedent, and the Supreme Court announcing its opinion on a particular issue. A living, breathing Constitution can all pretty much mean whatever you want it to mean. We need to have that firm foundation. So we do have ways to make amendments to the Constitution. The founders intentionally made it tough,
Right.
because
particularly lately, there have not been any.
No, no, and really, but that all goes back to the idea of being engaged at the local level and understanding, and what is your duties as a citizen to be engaged into that. So a constitutional conservative would really mean that know your Constitution and know the original intent of the founders. Understand if we want to make a change, we need to follow it the way that it was intended. If it needs to be amended in the proper course.
Okay, so any final message to the voters?
Sure. Well, please, if you want to learn more about me, go to voteforhowell.com, VOTE for FORHOWELL.com. You can learn more about me and my background there. Would love to meet more voters. Absolutely send me an email, send me a text, give me a call. I'd be happy to sit down with you, your family, your neighbors. One of the things that's kind of catching on is having folks in their neighborhood inviting people over, and me being able to come and meet and speak with the neighbors. Because again, it gets right back to that thing of how important it is to have a local community get involved in the political system. So I'd be happy to do that.
Great. All right.
So.
Derek Howell, Republican candidate for District 35B. The primary is in June, don't forget. get out and vote. Derek, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.